Long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Ogun, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow. It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. As always, I have my co-host, Jack McCurry of BigPlay.com with me. How you doing today, Jack?
Doing well. First time we've sat down about a week, so we got a lot to catch up on as it pertains to the Browns.
Yeah, we do. We thought we were going to be back last week, but unfortunately our schedules did not allow it. So we're going to kind of briefly go over the preseason game because everybody else has talked about it at length. So we're just going to cover some of the major highlights of that in the Blitz, and then after that we'll talk about some of the other news as it pertains to the Cleveland Browns. So we'll be right back with the Blitz.
Welcome to the Blitz segment, where Anthony and Jack get you caught up with news from the NFL and may or may not be wearing pants. This is the Blitz.
All right, Jack. The Cleveland Browns beat the Redskins in their first preseason game, 30-10. When you look at this game, we were kind of surprised that Baker actually played in this game. Now, OBJ and Landry did not. But Baker Mayfield, on his only drive, went 5 of 6 for a touchdown. The team went 89 yards in a little over 2 minutes. They basically ran a 2-minute drill for his only series of the game. What did you think of how the offense moved during that 2-minute drill?
I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, I tweeted out as soon as the touchdown happened, mission accomplished. I mean, like you said, I didn't expect any of the starters to play. I was telling people all day, I was like, I don't expect anybody to play. I said it's going to be boring, but, a majority of the offense did come out, and they went right down the field. I mean, to see what Baker was able to do without Beckham and without Landry just goes to show why Cleveland is so excited for the Browns this year. I mean, he was absolutely dominant, whether he was dumping it off to Hilliard or Chubb or, throwing it down the field to Strong and Higgins on that drive. Like, Baker was dominant, and he was everything I expected, and the offense, it looked fun. And to think that you're going to add Landry and Beckham and even the Joki, because the tight ends really weren't even a factor on that drive. It's just to show how dominant this offense definitely can be going forward.
What do you think of the decision to run a 2-minute drill to start that game out? My thought was, it's a great way to get those guys who were only going to be in there for one drive, like Mayfield, fully engaged in the game. Because when you're in a 2-minute situation, there's no lollygagging around. There's no, we'll just go out to the next play. Let's get up and run the play. So I thought it was a good move by Freddie as a way to get everybody involved and get everybody focused into that one drive.
Yeah, exactly what you said, like the 2-minute drill. And I don't know if anybody's seen the headlines over the weekend. The Browns told the Redskins, hey, we're going to run a 2-minute drill on your guys. And the fact that the Redskins could not stop it, even though they knew ahead of time what was coming, just goes to show, A, how bad the Redskins defense is, but also B, how dominant the Browns offense is. I thought it was great. It was just like another training camp session. End of training camp, they run these 2-minute drills, and, for the most part during camp they have struggled, but, the Browns finally were clicking on those 2-minute drills, and they put a touchdown on the board. So solid effort by the Browns offense, to say the least.
Rashard Higgins, who caught the touchdown pass from Baker Mayfield, ended up with 5 receptions for 90 yards and 1 touchdown. How primed is Higgins to have such a big year? We know last year He was hurt for those couple games, but early on in the preseason, he built up such a chemistry with Baker Mayfield as he was out there running on that second string. So how well do you think Rashard Higgins is ready to go for the season, and how much of an impact is he going to have?
Oh, he's definitely ready. And, if you look around, you see these national writers try to find a breakout performer. If you're going to find one on the Cleveland Browns, it's definitely Higgins. He looked absolutely dominant, whether it was with Baker or even when Drew Stanton and Garrett Gilbert came in, Higgins was catching everything coming his way. And it took him a couple of years to develop. He was a mid to late round pick coming out of Colorado State, but he has lived up to what I thought he could be coming out of college back in 2016. It did take him some time, but he's definitely has the tools to be a number 2 and definitely at least a number 3 receiver in this league. And we were talking about it during the game Thursday. You said we got to extend him. I don't know if that's going to happen. I want Higgins here, but he might become out of the Browns price range if he has a solid 2019 campaign, but he's definitely my breakout star, I think, for the Browns this coming season.
It's going to be interesting to see how his contract situation plays out, because after the season, you're probably going to extend Myles Garrett. So you have Joe Schobert to deal with. You have Demarius Randall as well. So it's going to be an interesting time this next offseason when it comes to contracts and how everybody performs. But we have all season to discuss that and how that's going to play out.
Don't forget David Njoku too.
David Njoku. Well, here that begs the question: if you had to pick between one right now to re-sign long term, whether it be Higgins or Njoku, who would you take?
Probably Njoku, because I think it would be more team friendly.
Okay. We'll
but ask me at the end of the season.
All right, we'll do. We'll put that one away for now. One of the Browns rookies, rookie linebacker Mack Wilson, he ended the game with 2 interceptions. He returned one of those for a touchdown off of rookie quarterback and Ohio State alumni Dwayne Haskins. Jack, when you look at Mack Wilson and what he was able to show off, he just can't stop having a nose for the football. All last week, he was intercepting passes. He brought it to the game last Thursday night. With Joe Schobert in a contract year, how much of an impact is Mack Wilson going to have backing him up, and is he going to see the field a lot this season?
I think that, with Wilson, he's coming on strong so far for the beginning of camp, and same with Sione Takitaki, but I think at this point, ease those two in. I think that, if they keep balling out during camp in the preseason, that you're going to see them get solid playing time. But I still think Schobert and Kirksey are the guys going forward. Kirksey looks like he's in great shape. Looks like he's, hopefully he gets off the injury bug. Obviously, we know what Schobert brings to the table. He missed Thursday's game because I think his wife was giving birth. And then he came back Friday and had a spectacular interception on Baker. So I think the linebacking core, that was the biggest concern coming into camp. I think that right now you see that there is depth in that position group. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I think Wilson and Takitaki are going to force the coach's hand into getting them out on the field much earlier than I think we all expected.
Yeah, I'm very excited for these two guys. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that when I was at training camp, these two guys were just flying around everywhere. I think we knew that Mack Wilson was good in pass coverage. We'll just have to see how he is when it comes to playing the run down the road. So I'm very excited to see where these two guys can develop, and I think Wilson's going to be able to contribute a lot this season. The final note from the preseason game, which I think we'll discuss here on the Blitz, is we all love a good feel-good story. And we talked about Damian Giuseppe a couple weeks ago on this podcast and his story. And Thursday night, he took back a punt for a touchdown, and you saw the entire team give him a massive dog pile in the end zone. Just everybody really happy for him. Everybody covered the story on ESPN and it was all over Twitter and whatnot. Jack, to me, this is more than a feel-good story. With the suspension of Antonio Callaway, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I think he's really going to play himself into a spot on this team when it comes to the final cutdowns.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it before camp that he was one of my underdogs. We both agreed that he was going to be one of the underdogs to watch in camp. And, you know, we have not had that solid return option since Josh Cribbs left 6 years ago. And, you know, we had Travis Benjamin, we had Jabril Peppers. Those guys were okay, but nothing like Josh Cribbs was. I feel like DSG can be that guy. And, you know, what a feel-good story. Like, if he makes the roster, you can go ahead and start writing that script for like a Disney movie, because this has all the makings of it. I mean, to see where he came from the last couple years, you know, fighting his way to get a shot somewhere, whether it was a D1 college or ultimately the NFL, to see this kid working. After the game, he went back to the Berea facility and was working out till 3 a.m. On Friday and Saturday, you know, he practiced, did his media rounds, and then went back out and was on the jugs machine. This kid is working. This is what you want in an NFL player. And, you know, he keeps this up. You know, we need guys that are going to be able to play special teams. You know, I know everybody's penciling in Derek Willis and Jalen Strong, but I think DSG belongs on this roster at this point, because if he can continue to do that with his 4.3 speed in the return game, how can you not put him on this roster? We need that return threat. We need that special teams threat. You know, this game is won and lost in all three phases. And if you have somebody like that on the special teams, you don't want to let that go.
Yeah, definitely. And I would like to see him get a couple kickoff returns as well. I know Hilliard's been doing that, but I want to see him back there on that unit as well as punt return. So I'm sure we'll see more of that the second week, especially, as I mentioned before, with Callaway being suspended. All right, we put a poll out there for our 1085 top dog of the game with the win over Washington. The choices were Mayfield, who went 5-6 for a touchdown, Mack Wilson, who had 2 interceptions and a touchdown, Chihi Giuseppe, who had a punt return for a touchdown, and Higgins, who had 5 receptions for 98 yards and a touchdown. And the overwhelming top dog that everybody voted on was Mack Wilson, who got 68% of the vote. Jack, is that a poll result that you can agree with?
Absolutely. I mean, all guys are viable options, but Mack Wilson was clearly the top dog of the game. To not only pick off Haskins not just once but twice and then take one back to the house, you know, that was phenomenal, and he definitely is deserving of the top dog.
All right, as we transition from the Blitz to the rest of the podcast, we have some news that we need to discuss and that we haven't had a chance to discuss yet. And the first big piece of news is that the Browns traded Duke Johnson to the Houston Texans for a 2020 conditional 4th-round pick. That pick will become a 3rd-round pick if Duke Johnson is on the active roster for 10 of the 16 games. Jack, was this a good move for the Cleveland Browns, and do you think that they maximized the value that they received from the Texans?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you look at trading running backs, you know, this position is it's a dying position in football because it's so replaceable. You know, I think it was Ian Rappaport tweet out that this was the highest level of compensation in a trade involving a running back since Trent Richardson, which, of course, was the Browns. We got that 1st-round pick from the Colts for him a few years back. But, you know, with Duke, you know, you knew that the end was drawing near. Although Dorsey kept saying Duke's got a spot on this team, Kitchens was saying he has a role here. I never thought that it was going to be a long-term fit here. And then, you know, when Rosenhaus was in Berea 2 times within a week, you kind of knew that the wheels were probably in motion. And then, you know, with Duke sitting out with the hamstring injury, I think the writing was right there on the wall. I don't think he was really hurt, although he's still sitting out in Houston. Maybe that's just, you know, semantics there, just to keep him out a little longer to prove that he was legitimately injured. I'm using air quotes when I say that. But, you know, for the Browns to get a 4th-round pick, which I think will ultimately become a 3rd-round pick because Duke has not missed a game yet, and he's always been durable. I think this was a great trade once again by Dorsey and the front office.
No, I think they were able to get that compensation not because he's a running back, but because of how well he's able to perform in the passing game. The entire emphasis on the NFL is, what can you do for me in the passing game? And because Duke Johnson is valuable in that aspect, I think that's why that they were able to get such a high value for a quote-unquote running back. I think he's more than that. It'll be interesting to see how the Houston Texans use him. Obviously, he'll be behind Lamar Miller, so it should be an interesting way to see how that plays out down there in Houston with him being down there now.
I just want. Yeah, I think it's a solid fit for him to go to Houston. Like you said, backing up Lamar Miller, he should get a significant amount of playing time. My only thing is with Houston, they should be trading draft picks to try to get some offensive line there. You sent me the video of Joe Webb playing behind that offensive line against Green Bay. That offensive line is terrible, and there's a reason why Deshaun Watson is been injured a lot, and there's a reason why people are more high on Baker Mayfield than Deshaun Watson at this point, is because Watson can't stay healthy, and that's the prime reason why. I understand that the GM situation down there in Houston is a little shaky at the moment, and Bill O'Brien's essentially running the team, but they are going to kill Deshaun Watson if they do not get him some protection there. And that is just a waste of a potential franchise quarterback. So I like the addition of Duke Johnson to that offense, but until they get some protection, Houston's not going to get very far in the AFC, which ultimately is good for us, but I feel bad for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that offensive line situation down there and their GM situation is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially if Deshaun Watson is, gets injured again, and we'll definitely keep an eye on that for sure. Antonio Callaway, the day after the preseason game, was suspended by the NFL for 4 games for violating the drug policy. We don't know what drug or what substance caused the suspension, but after his speeding ticket last year and some of the other off-the-field incidents that he had in Florida, Jack, when you look at Antonio Callaway, I know it was a low risk taking him in the 4th round. He was a guy that could have potentially gone in the 1st round if it weren't for the red flags. But what do you think of the future outlook of Antonio Callaway, and what is his place going to be on this team when he comes back from that 4-game suspension?
I mean, I've heard this being talked about on the sports talk radio around here. Callaway is pretty much on his last chance. He's got the talent, but he's had the hiccups along the way. And, the Browns have supported him. They've taken a lot of criticism by drafting him. But the kid is talented. And I heard that Ron Wolf told John Dorsey, taught him, you got to take chances on these guys and try to surround them with the best support group possible. And they've tried to do that, but ultimately at the end of the day, much like with the Josh Gordon situation that we had to deal with so many years, it's up to the person, and it's up to Antonio Callaway. And the thing is, going forward is, he's already got Odell Beckham, he's got Jarvis Landry, and he's essentially got Rashard Higgins already in front of him on the depth chart. So Callaway is in a lose-lose situation because he's already falling behind the depth chart, add in the fact that he showed up out of shape coming into camp. Things aren't going well for him. So hopefully he does learn from this and realize that this is his potential last opportunity in Cleveland. Because if he slips up again, it will not surprise me, especially with guys like Derek Willis, DSG, and Jalen Strong, Ish Hyman, DJ Montgomery. There's a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. The Browns don't essentially need him. Callaway's a luxury, but at this point he needs to get on the straight and narrow, because if he wants to have a future in the NFL, he's got to get everything in order.
Yeah, we don't want him to end up like another former wide receiver that we had on this team. I hope the best for Antonio, and you heard John Dorsey talk about how they have help on the way for him and a plan in place to help him get back on track. And I hope that Antonio was able to follow that and be able to follow that plan to a T and get back on that football field come week 5. When you look at this wide receiving core, you talked about a little bit. I wanted to take a look at kind of the locks, for this wide receiver group and take a look at the next group there. Obviously Odell is locked in. Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins. I would say Derek Willis is probably locked in too. And then you have a few guys behind them, such as Jalen Strong, Ish Hyman, DSG, and Antonio Callaway. Until we get to week 5 when Antonio comes back, who do you see making the team out of Jalen Strong, Ish Hyman, DSG, Damian Raleigh, DJ Montgomery, and Dorian Baker?
Right now, I would say Jalen Strong and DSG, just because, Hyman and Montgomery are slowly coming on, but they haven't shown enough, both as a receiver and in the special teams unit. Now, obviously, DSG is raw as a wide receiver, and he's still learning, but I'm giving him the edge just because of what he's done on special teams. And then, Radley, I think, was a guy that we all expected to make the roster, but he's been on the sidelines with an injury. Things aren't working out in his favor right now. He's got to get out on the field. I can see a scenario where the Browns would just put him probably on injured reserve so that they retain his rights, because I don't think they want to lose him, because he's another one of these long, athletic, speedy wide receivers that could help us down the road, especially if we have to move guys like Higgins or Landry or etc. But right now I would give the edge to Strong and DSG. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those two guys are definitely in the driver's seat for those last couple of receiving positions. I'm curious how it's going to play out when Antonio comes back. I know, unfortunately there's always injuries, so that you have to consider that as a factor down the road. But yeah, for now, for me it'd be Jalen Strong and DSG as those last two receivers for a total of 6 so far, and we'll be curious to see how that plays out when Antonio gets back down the road. During the preseason game, we noticed that Eric Kush started right guard and Austin Corbett was his backup. Jack, how do you think this whole situation has played out so far? We've talked about this at length already. Austin Corbett has not been able to lock down this position so far. How do you think of how this is playing out?
I'm surprised the way it's played out, but I think at this point, I think it's safe to say that Kush is going to be the starting right guard unless an injury happens. And I think at this point, Corbett is being groomed potentially as the long-term center. J.C. Treader is another guy that could potentially come up in contract extension talks, or the Browns might let him walk after this season. So I think at this point they are trying to find a role for Austin Corbett, which is scary because, and I said this last week, this reeks of Cam Irving 2.0, and I hate to say that because I liked Cam and I like Corbett as well. And of course, Cam, established himself in Kansas City, although he's currently a backup there. But I just hope that Corbett, they find him a position and just keep him there. Quit shuffling him around. They're doing this with Corbett. They did it with Cam. They're doing it with Drew Forbes at this point too. I don't know offensive line. I'm not a coach. I'm not going to act like I am, but I feel like moving these guys back and forth to new positions all the time isn't going to do them any favors, but I could be totally wrong. But I hope they find something for Corbett. But as for Kush, I'm glad that they finally kind of decided on one and are moving forward, because it seems like he was always the best option. I think we were just hopeful that Corbett would be the guy to pull away with the job.
It's funny because, going into the season, Corbett was the long-term solution for right guard after trading Zeitler. Now it's that, all right, he's going to be the long-term solution for center after J.C. Treader's contract expires after the season. So I hope they can figure it out. We'll see how it plays out over these last few preseason games as we head into the regular season. But for now, Eric Kush has that spot locked down, and we'll see if Corbett can perform and hopefully get back into that starting lineup, or if he's just going to be a reserve as we head into the season. During practice on Monday, which is today, we're recording this on Monday, August 12th, Chad Thomas, who actually played decently in the preseason game on Thursday night, was carted off the field with a neck injury. They said he had feeling in all his extremities. They took him down to the hospital for further testing. Jack, when you watched what he did on Thursday night, were you surprised or relieved of his performance and what he was able to do? And do you think that he could potentially see some playing time this year?
Yeah, I thought, the couple of times I seen him, he was disruptive. He was, giving the Redskins offensive line a tough time. It might not show it in the box score, but, I thought Thomas was playing well. It's unfortunate that this injury happened. They had to immobilize him and cart him off. Hopefully we get an update here pretty soon to, see what the injury is, how long he's going to be out. But, it's a shame because it seemed like, he was coming on and he was going to get a role, be able to be part of the rotation perhaps on the defensive line, to give guys like Vernon and Garrett a breather to go in and make some kind of play. So hopefully he's okay. And, as we look at that defensive line, you got guys like Zettel, Devereaux, Lawrence, who look like an absolute monster at D tackle. There is some depth there. They could use a little more, which is apparent that they went after guys like McCoy and Daniels earlier this offseason. So I'm not too worried about the defensive line depth, but I just hope Thomas is okay because it seemed like he was coming on. We gave him a lot of slack last year and at the start of camp and everything, but he seemed like he was making strides on the defensive line.
Yeah, I hope that Thomas can, get better and, get back on the football field soon. And, it's funny how, we praise John Dorsey for his, incredible pick of Baker, Greedy Williams and Mack Wilson so far. But those picks on day 2 last year with Chad Thomas and Austin Corbett are not looking very good right now. So hopefully those picks, Chad Thomas and Corbett, are able to perform a little bit better and are able to contribute to this team. Now, not every team is going to hit on every single draft pick. I think we know that more than anybody, more than any other team. But when you start to hit on some guys, I think you expect to hit on those guys in the second and third rounds. And for Thomas and Corbett to have struggled so far, I think it's fair criticism to send John Dorsey's way, even though he has done so much more for this team than any other GM has in a long time. So hopefully Thomas can get better soon and get back on the football field. Some other news, some other transactions. Fullback tight end Orson Charles was released. In correlating moves, the Browns signed tight end Rico Gathers and fullback Joe Carriage, who's a fullback. Jack, bringing these guys in and talk about Orson Charles, who we thought was a lock for this team being cut. What did you think of these moves?
It was definitely a surprise. I think we all should have seen it when they signed Carriage on Saturday. And then Sunday came and they signed Rico Gathers, who I actually like. We'll talk about here in a minute. But when they cut Charles, it was kind of like, well, maybe we should have seen this coming. So maybe there's something going on behind the scenes with Charles that we don't know about. Maybe we'll find out here soon. But for the Browns going forward, obviously the front office has ties to Carriage. He was in Green Bay the last couple seasons, so Highsmith and Elliott Wolf are clearly familiar with him. And for Charles, hopefully he finds another spot because he played well as the H-back last season when the Browns went on their run down down the stretch in the second half of the year. So hopefully he finds another role on another team because he can be utilized definitely as an H-back still in the NFL.
Yeah, hopefully he's able to find another team, and hopefully these guys that they brought in are able to contribute. And I don't know how much we'll be using a fullback, but in those short yard situations, I'm sure Kitchens has plans to use one. So we'll see how it plays out. Looking ahead, this week should be an interesting week and kind of a newsworthy week because the Browns are traveling down to Indianapolis this week to hold joint practices with the Indianapolis Colts ahead of their preseason game on Saturday night. Jack, what do you expect to see this week from the Browns and the Colts, and what are your expectations?
I just want to see competition. This is another rising team in the AFC. Obviously, the Colts were in the playoffs last year, made some big moves in the offseason. Ballard was under Dorsey, so he's learned a lot from Dorsey, part of that Ron Wolf GM tree. So I just ready to see some competition, see how we match up against another AFC contender. Obviously, they won't be at full strength. Andrew Luck's out. But to see our defensive line go up against their offensive line, seeing Richardson and Ogunjobi go up against Quentin Nelson should be a joy to watch. See, maybe Denzel Ward go up against Paris Campbell at some point. Obviously they got T.Y. Hilton there. So, it's interesting because the Browns and the Colts are on the same trajectory a little bit. The Colts have a little bit of an edge. But, this could be a potential playoff preview that we're going to see not only in practice this week, but also in the AFC playoff picture. Maybe a divisional or a wild card matchup against the Colts. That would be fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. The Colts definitely bounced back last year with Andrew Luck getting healthy. Hopefully the secondary this week is up to the task of playing him, and we'll see how Myles Garrett is able to get after Andrew Luck this week. I think those are all fun matchups to watch. Ahead of Saturday night's game, I don't know if we'll do a preview podcast before that game. So if we don't, Jack, what are you looking to see in the second preseason game? As we get closer to the regular season.
Hopefully, if the first team offense is out there again, just see another solid, whether it's for one series or one quarter, just see solid drives to continue to build on what they did last week against the Washington Redskins. On the defensive side, just continue to see the growth. Obviously, like I said, the defensive line's got a tough matchup this week against the Colts offensive line. In the secondary as well, they're going up against a ton of skill players on that Colts offense. So that'll be fun to watch. Obviously, going to be watching, Wilson and Taki, Greedy, DSG, a lot of the young guys, and of course the back end of the roster because that's what's crucial to watch here during these preseason games is who's going to fill out the 53-man roster. What are you going to be watching?
Yeah, same thing. It's the back end of the roster. Who's going to be contributing on special teams? How the kicking battle is going to shake out. I know Greg Joseph has had the lead for a little bit, but Cyber hit a 52-yarder in practice a couple days ago, so I think that battle is alive and well. The kicking conditions in Indianapolis should be fine since they play on turf, so I think we'll be able to get a really good judgment on how that's going to shape out. To me, it's just the back end of the roster, see who's going to fill it out. A lot of the starting positions are already locked down. Can a few players here and there push the starters and maybe keep it to the starting lineup? We'll find out. But for me, that's the main thing heading into the second preseason game. All right, Jack, as we get on out of here, is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
I mean, unless you want to discuss some of the stuff that's come out while we're recording, I think we're good to go.
We'll do it briefly here. So two things of note that come out since we have been recording is that Antonio Brown lost his hearing with an arbitrator about wearing his old helmet. Reports came out a few days ago about he might retire if he cannot wear his old helmet. I guess the NFL have new regulations on the types of helmets that you could wear, and Antonio Brown's is not on that list. And one of the other new piece of news that came out is that Dak Prescott is looking for $40 million a year from the Cowboys. He turned down a $30 million per year offer from them. So, Jack, when you look at those two stories, what catches your eye more? And I'll let you have the floor here.
Well, I'll just touch it briefly on both topics. Antonio Brown, that story is getting more bizarre with each passing day. I don't expect him to retire just because there's $30 million guaranteed on the table. He's going to find a new helmet. The Raiders are trying to help him with this. I don't know if there's something going on mentally with AB, but if there is, hopefully the Raiders and the NFL get him some help. He is truly one of, if not the best wide receivers in the game. And, he just needs to suck it up, find a new helmet, get out there on the field. As for Dak, I like Dak Prescott. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but I also think that Ezekiel Elliott's success has helped his success as well. So if he's getting all this money, he needs to kick some of that to Zeke, because Zeke has helped Dak get to where he's been, and how he's established himself as one of the top quarterbacks in the league. I'll let you.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that with Dak Prescott. And they have a lot of guys that they need to pay. They have Prescott, they have Ezekiel Elliott, they have Amari Cooper, Jalen Smith. So plus that some of those young guys on that offensive line, they're going to have to pay as well. The Cowboys are really going to have to figure out what they're going to do. Obviously, once you have a quarterback, you're going to want to keep him. So they're going to have to make sacrifices at other positions. And we'll see what they do here in the future. But I guarantee you that Prescott is going to get his money. I'm not sure he's going to get $40 million, but he'll get somewhere in between those two figures that we're talking about earlier. And when it comes to Antonio Brown, once again, I guess the Steelers look smart getting a third and fifth round pick for him. He's certainly an interesting character, that's for sure. And I guess when you look at the hindsight of everything that went on in Pittsburgh, I guess you could say that maybe Roethlisberger's side of this story was the more right one. So, we'll continue to monitor how that one plays out there in Oakland. I'm sure it's going to make for fantastic television on Hard Knocks if and when he rejoins the team.
He just posted on Instagram, quote, "While I agree with the arbitrator's decision, I'm working on getting back to full health and looking forward to rejoining my teammates on the field. I'm excited about this season. Appreciate all the concerns about my feet." So clearly he has sucked it up, realized that, I'm leaving a lot of money on the table by potentially quitting, and I'll be able to find a helmet that's going to help me out. So smart thinking there, AB. So hopefully his feet get all healed up and he gets back out on the field, because he is truly one of the best playmakers in the league. So
yeah, hopefully he'll wear cleats onto the football field and not sandals. That should benefit him.
Only Braylon Edwards does that.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with that. All right, Jack. Guys, we're getting out of here. Anything else?
No. So I'll go ahead and cover everything. Follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle. Check out bigplay.com for all the latest in the sports world. I do a lot of writing over there, so definitely check that out. And Anthony, the floor is yours.
As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki. Be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085 Gridiron. You can find our podcast on any platform, podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We absolutely appreciate it. And with all that, we're going to get on out of here. We might be back later this week before the game. We're not sure yet. But until then, and as always, go Browns.